Convert x, which is just another way of saying a raw score, to z. Normally when you have any kind of conversion from one type of score to another, you're going to have a formula that you use to figure that out. You're going to be able to plug these values into the formula. But we know that z tells us how many standard deviations, so how many standard deviations we are, or let me say a score is, from the mean. So we can work this out without a formula. We can take our raw score, like we have in part A here, and figure out how many 20s, how many standard deviations is that from 100? Well, the difference between my score of 140 and my mean equals to 100. If I do the difference between them, and you can figure that out by just subtracting, 140 minus 100, we have a difference of 40. And it's a positive difference. 140 is ahead of 100. It's a larger number than 100. So we know our z-score for part A is going to be equals to a positive, but it's not going to be positive 40. That's how many points we are above 100. Instead, I need to know how many 20s I am. And 40 is 2 20s. It's 2 standard deviations above the mean. So that's my answer for part A. What about in part B? Well, we can do the same thing. We can figure out the difference between 42 and our mean, which is 60. Well, now if I find the difference, it's going to be negative 18. And the negative tells me that my z-score is going to be negative. My z-score being negative tells me that my raw score is less than or lower than the mean. How much lower is it? Well, I need to know how many 12s it is. I know that it's 18, but how many times does 12 go into 18? How many standard deviations is 42 away from 60? Well, if you work it out this way, let's say you've got 12, we've got 1 standard deviation, and then how much is left over after I take away 12 from here? I'm going to have 6. So 12 plus 6, that makes my 18. This is 1 standard deviation, and then 6 is a half of a standard deviation. So I know that my z-score has to be 1.5 standard deviations. So it's 1.5 standard deviations, but we don't leave that part on. The z-score tells us how many standard deviations. It doesn't have any units. So my answer is that 42 is 1.5 standard deviations below 60, or has a negative z-score of negative 1.5.